The night was unusually still, the kind of silence where even the crickets seemed to pause. Our lakeside cabin, usually a sanctuary of peace, sat under the glow of the moon, its wooden beams soaking in the cool silver light. My wife, Laura, had just poured us both a cup of chamomile tea when we heard the unmistakable rattle of a doorknob. At first, I thought it was the wind tugging at the back door, but then came the harsh scrape of metal, the heavy push against wood someone was trying to force their way in. Laura froze, her hand trembling slightly as she set her cup down. "John," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Someone's at the door." I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the shelf, my heartbeat pounding like a drum in my ears. I moved slowly toward the sound, every step echoing in the still night. And when I reached the door, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, our neighbor Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Her hair was wild from the wind, her face twisted with rage, and her hands yanked furiously at the lock like she had every right in the world to be there. "Karen," I shouted through the glass pane, my voice sharp. "What in the world are you doing?" She whipped her head toward me, her eyes burning with indignation. "You don't belong here, John. This cabin, this whole property should have been torn down years ago. The HOA voted, and I'm making sure it happens." Her words hit me like ice. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was breaking and entering. "Step away from my door before I call the cops," I warned, holding the flashlight tight in my hand. But instead of leaving, she smirked. "Oh, don't bother. I'll call them for you. We'll see whose side they're really on." And she did. Minutes later, the quiet night was shattered by the blinding flash of red and blue lights bouncing off the trees. 2 patrol cars pulled into our gravel driveway, their beams slicing through the darkness. Karen rushed toward them, her fingers stretched out like a spear, pointing directly at me. "That's the man," she shouted, her voice dripping with triumph. "He threatened me. He's squatting on property that isn't even legal. Arrest him." The officers turned their flashlights on me, their boots crunching over gravel as they approached. My stomach sank. What if they believed her? But then, everything shifted in an instant. One officer's light landed on Laura, who had stepped quietly onto the porch beside me. His face drained of color, his mouth parted in shock. "Commander," he whispered, his voice trembling. The world froze. Karen blinked, caught completely off guard. The other officers looked at him, bewildered. Laura's eyes softened as she crossed her arms. "It's been a long time, Officer Daniels," she said quietly. And just like that, the balance of power changed. The moment stretched, thick with confusion. Daniels, the taller of the 2 officers, lowered his flashlight, his hand still trembling. The younger officer beside him looked from Karen to us, completely lost. Karen's smug grin faltered. What are you doing?" "Don't just stand there. Arrest them. They're trespassing. That cabin is on HOA-controlled land. It's an eyesore." She threatened me, but Daniels didn't move. His chest rose and fell heavily, as if he were staring at a ghost. Finally, he took a shaky step forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that's Commander Laura Hayes." His words dropped like stones into the night air. My heart thudded. Laura gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I knew then what I had long suspected. The quiet life she had chosen at the lake was a sharp contrast to the power she once carried. Karen let out a harsh laugh, her voice sharp and desperate. "Commander, don't be ridiculous. She's just some woman living in a rundown shack. Do your job and arrest them." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Thompson, I think you'd better step back." "Step back? Are you insane?" Karen snapped, her voice climbing. "I am the HOA president. This is my jurisdiction. They've been ignoring our orders, defying community rules. You work for me?" "No," Daniel said firmly, his voice cutting through the night. "We don't work for you. And unless I've suddenly forgotten everything about chain of command, she outranks all of us combined." The younger officer blinked, whispering under his breath, "Commander." "As in the Commander Hayes?" Daniels gave a slow nod, his gaze never leaving Laura. My wife finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. Daniels, I told you years ago when I retired I didn't want this uniform to follow me home. I came here for peace, not power. Her words silenced everyone. The younger officer lowered his light, his respect clear in his eyes. Karen, however, wasn't finished. She stomped her foot like a spoiled child. You're all being tricked. This is my neighborhood, my authority. She's a liar. Can't you see she's manipulating you? Laura stepped forward, her gaze level and unwavering. Karen, you tried to force your way into our home. That's a crime. And now you're attempting to use law enforcement as your weapon. That ends tonight. Her calm. Steady words carried more weight than any shout could. Daniel straightened, his voice professional again. Mrs. Thompson, I'm warning you. If you don't step back immediately, we'll have no choice but to escort you off this property. Karen's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, she spat. You'll all regret this. I'll have your badges, Daniels. I'll sue this whole department. You don't know who you're dealing with? But for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. The officers stayed planted, their stance protective now not of Karen, but of us. Laura placed a gentle hand on my arm. I could feel the steadiness in her touch, the unshakable calm of someone who had faced far worse. She whispered just loud enough for me to hear. This isn't about power, John. It's about standing firm with truth. The standoff ended with Karen storming off into the night, her threats echoing uselessly down the road. The patrol cars idled a few minutes longer until Daniels was sure she was gone. He turned back to Laura, his voice softer now. Commander, I can't believe it's really you. You saved my life once. Do you remember the warehouse raid in '98? Laura's eyes softened. I remember. You were barely 22, scared out of your mind. But you didn't freeze. You followed orders. You were brave. His voice cracked. I never forgot what you told me after. That leadership isn't about barking commands. It's about protecting those who trust you. It changed me. It kept me in this job. Laura smiled faintly, her eyes misty. I'm glad you stayed, Daniels. You were one of the good ones. The younger officer spoke hesitantly. Ma'am, I've only heard stories about you. Legends, really. I didn't think they were true. Laura chuckled softly. Legends have a way of getting bigger in the telling. I was just a woman doing her job, but even in her humility, I saw the respect, the awe radiating from both officers. That night, after the patrol cars left, Laura and I sat together on the porch, the lake shimmering in the moonlight. My heart was still racing from the chaos, but she held my hand with quiet strength. She won't stop, John, she said gently. People like Karen, they don't know when to quit. I nodded. Then we'll be ready, together. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about property or HOA politics. This was about something deeper. Karen had awakened a part of Laura she had long buried, a part forged in fire and loyalty, in sacrifice, and as much as Karen wanted to break us, she had no idea what she was truly up against. The morning after Karen's failed break-in and the shocking recognition of my wife as commander, the lake was quiet again. The water reflected the rising sun, painting the sky in hues of gold and lavender. But inside me, there was no peace. My chest still burned from the memory of Karen's venomous words and her threats. Laura, however, sat across from me at the breakfast table with an air of calm. She buttered her toast as if the night before had been no more than a passing storm. Her serenity amazed me, but I couldn't shake my unease. Laura, I said finally, setting my coffee mug down with a soft thud, she's not done. You saw her face? That woman's obsessed with control. She'll come back at us. Laura glanced up, her blue eyes steady. Of course she will. People like Karen thrive on conflict. But we don't give her power by fearing her. We stay grounded in truth. I sighed, running a hand through my graying hair. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, she admitted softly, but it's necessary. By mid-afternoon, the first sign of Karen's retaliation arrived. Not a knock this time, but a letter slipped under our gate. The envelope bore the HOA's embossed seal, an attempt at intimidation. I opened it, my stomach tightening with each line. Notice of violation, authorized dwelling structure on HOA-governed land, noise complaints filed by residents, reports of suspicious activity. At the bottom, Karen's signature stretched in bold ink, smug and self-assured. Laura read the letter over my shoulder, then gave a quiet laugh. Suspicious activity? I suppose drinking tea and reading books at night is quite the scandal. I wasn't in the mood for humor. She's trying to build a case. Paper trails, complaints, fake reports. She wants us out. Laura placed her hand gently over mine. And she'll fail. Lies don't hold forever. But even as she reassured me, I could feel the shadow of Karen's schemes creeping closer. Within a week, the change in our neighborhood was undeniable. People we had waved to for years suddenly avoided eye contact. Conversations halted when we walked by. Whispers rose behind us at the local store. Karen had been busy. She told anyone who would listen that Laura and I were squatters, that we'd faked ownership documents, that we were dangerous. One afternoon, as I carried groceries to the car, old Mr. Jenkins from across the lake approached me. He was usually kind, always quick with a joke about fishing, but this time his face was tight, uneasy. "John," he said cautiously, "you ought to know. Karen's been holding meetings. Says you and your wife are troublemakers. Says she's got proof you don't belong here." I clenched my jaw. "And do you believe her?" He hesitated, his wrinkled hands fumbling with his cap. I don't know what to believe. She's persuasive. But I know you too. You've never caused harm." Laura stepped out of the car then, smiling kindly. "Mr. Jenkins, we'd never do anything to hurt this community. Please remember that." Her calmness disarmed him. He nodded, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I just thought you should know what's being said." As he walked away, I muttered under my breath, "She's poisoning them." Laura touched my arm. "Truth shines brightest when lies grow darkest. Give it time." But Karen wasn't content with whispers. A week later, we faced her boldest stunt yet. It was a Saturday morning when we heard the crunch of footsteps and voices outside. I stepped onto the porch to find a group of at least 10 HOA members marching down our drive, clipboards in hand. At their center was Karen, her face triumphant. "What's this about?" I demanded. Karen held up a stack of papers like a queen displaying her crown. "Community inspection. We're here to document violations. Your so-called cabin is unsafe, unauthorized, and disruptive. This won't take long." My blood boiled. "You can't just walk onto private property." "This isn't private property," she sneered. "It belongs to the community. To us. And I'll prove it." The group fanned out, scribbling notes, snapping photos with their phones. My fists clenched, but before I could react, Laura's voice rang out calm yet commanding. "Stop." The word carried weight. Everyone froze, turning toward her. Laura stood tall on the porch, her presence quiet but undeniable. "This cabin," she said firmly, "was built legally, purchased legally, and has been our home for years. You may gossip, you may complain, but you will not trespass." One woman muttered, but Karen said. Laura's gaze softened as she looked at her. "I know what she said. But ask yourself, have you ever seen us harm this place? Or have you only heard her words?" The woman hesitated, her pen lowering. Karen barked, "Don't listen to her lies. She's manipulating you all. She's dangerous." "She's enough," Laura cut in. Her voice didn't rise, but it silenced everyone. Dangerous isn't standing quietly in her home. Dangerous is the one trying to destroy her neighbors with lies. The crowd wavered. Some looked uncertain. A few lowered their clipboards. But Karen snarled, "This isn't over. I'll prove you're frauds if it's the last thing I do." And with that, she stormed off, her army trailing behind, divided and uneasy. That evening, as the sun set over the lake, There was a soft knock at our door. I opened it to find Mr. Jenkins again, his eyes wet with shame. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I let her scare me. But I saw today. I saw the way you both stood there, calm while she raged. That's not the behavior of liars. That's the strength of people telling the truth." His words brought a lump to my throat. He wasn't the only one by the end of the week. Few other neighbors quietly approached us, offering apologies, small gestures of support. For the first time, I felt hope. Karen's grip was slipping, but Laura warned me gently that night as we sat on the porch. The crickets singing around us. "Karen isn't finished, John. People like her don't stop when they lose ground. They get desperate, and as if fate had been listening, soon learned just how right she was." 2 weeks later, the flashing lights returned. Another patrol car in our driveway. This time, Karan had filed a formal complaint accusing us of dangerous activity on our property. I stood with my fists clenched as Daniel stepped out of the car again, his face weary but firm. "John, Laura," he sighed, "I'm sorry. We have to check this out." "A report came in. From Karen, I assume," I said bitterly. He nodded. "Yes, and I know it's nonsense. But procedure demands we respond." Laura placed a hand on my arm, steadying me before I exploded. She looked at Daniels with calm authority. "Do what you must, officer. We have nothing to hide." Karen stood at the edge of the drive, arms crossed, a smirk plastered on her face. But as Daniels and the younger officer inspected the property, finding nothing out of order, her smirk slowly faltered. Finally, Daniels turned to her. His patience was gone. "Mrs. Thompson, this is the third false report you filed. This needs to stop." Her face twisted. "You're protecting them. Because she used to be your boss? This is corruption. I'll have you all fired." But for the first time, her voice didn't ring with certainty. It rang with desperation. Laura stepped closer, her voice calm but cutting. "Karen, truth doesn't bend to your will. And eventually, your lies will bury you." Karen's eyes burned with hatred as she turned on her heel and stormed away. But I could see it, her power was cracking, her empire of fear crumbling, and deep down, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The following week was tense, almost suffocating. Even though Karen's lies were starting to lose traction, I could feel the weight of her obsession pressing against our cabin like a storm, waiting to break. Neighbors who had once whispered behind our backs now gave us cautious nods. A few even offered warm smiles when Karen wasn't watching. But her glare followed us everywhere, from the general store to the mailbox. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Laura seemed as calm as ever, but I could see it in her, those subtle signs of wear. The way her shoulders tightened at night, the way she paused at the window when headlights passed on the road. "John," she said, one evening as we sat by the fire, "Karen's building towards something. She's too quiet. When people like her go silent, it's because they're planning their next move." I frowned, poking at the embers, then let her come. "I'm tired of waiting for the shoe to drop." Laura gave me that steady look, the one that always tempered my fire. "We don't fight chaos with chaos. We fight it with truth and patience." It was 2 nights later when the pounding at the door startled us awake. This time, there was no rattling doorknob or whisper of footsteps. It was the heavy thud of authority. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, his face serious, flanked by 2 more officers. Behind them, I saw Karen lurking in the shadows, her arms crossed, her grin sharp as glass. "John." "Laura," Daniel said, his tone clipped, "we've received another report. We need to talk." Karen stepped forward, practically shrieking. "Arrest them already. They're dangerous. They're plotting something in that cabin. You're just too blind to see it." Daniels ignored her and looked at Laura. His expression was heavy, conflicted. "Ma'am, Commander, I hate to do this, but the department is under pressure. Karen's filed so many reports the higher-ups want me to handle this by the book. We need to conduct a full search." My blood boiled. This is insane. She's abusing the system. Laura put her hand on my arm, steadying me as always. She looked Daniels in the eye. "You do what you need to do. You'll find nothing but the truth." The officers moved through our home, respectful but thorough. They checked every room, every closet, every drawer. Karen followed them with her phone out, recording gleefully, narrating like she was producing some kind of reality show. "See, look at that. Suspicious. Probably stolen." She barked when they passed our antique bookshelf. Daniels shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. But she didn't flinch. After nearly an hour, the officers reconvened in the living room. Daniels shook his head. "Nothing. Not a shred of evidence." "Exactly as I expected," Karen exploded. "You're covering for them. This is corruption. She brainwashed you because she used to be your boss." And that's when Daniels snapped. His voice thundered through the cabin, every ounce of restraint gone. "You think this is about favoritism? You think this is about politics? You want the truth, Karen? Fine." He turned to the younger officer beside him. "You ever hear about the warehouse raid in '98? The one where 5 officers nearly didn't make it out alive?" The younger man nodded slowly. "It's in the training files. Legendary story." Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. "I was one of those 5. And the only reason I'm standing here today is because Commander Hayes pulled me out when the building was collapsing. She risked her life. She carried me when I couldn't move. She ordered the others to safety when chaos swallowed the room." The young officer's eyes widened. As he looked at Laura with awe, Daniel's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "She saved me. And if she says she belongs here, if she says she's telling the truth, then I'd stake my badge and my life on it." The room went silent. Karen's face drained of color, her bravado faltering. That's just a story," she stammered. "Doesn't mean she's not lying now," but her words were weak, flimsy. The officer's respect for Laura was clear. Even the younger one stood straighter in her presence, his doubt erased. Laura, however, didn't gloat. She simply placed a hand on Daniel's arm and said softly, "Thank you. But don't give me more credit than I deserve. I was just doing my job." Daniel's eyes shone. "That's the difference, Commander. To you, it was just a job. To us, it was everything." Karen tried one last time, her voice shrill. "You're all fools. She's tricked you, every one of you. The HOA will not be silenced." But the words hung empty in the air. For the first time, she looked small. News of the confrontation spread quickly through the neighborhood. Within days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen strutted in, still trying to command authority, but the room felt different now. Eyes that once followed her blindly now darted with suspicion. Laura and I sat quietly in the back as Karen launched into another tirade. "They're liars. Fraudsters. If you don't stand with me, this community will collapse." But this time, murmurs of disagreement rose from the crowd. One man stood. It was Mr. Jenkins. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. "Karen, I've lived here 30 years. I've seen good neighbors and bad ones. John and Laura. They've never harmed this place. But you've turned us against each other. You've spread fear, lies, and hate. I won't stand for it anymore." Others nodded. A few even clapped softly. Karen's face flushed scarlet. "You traitors. All of you." But the tide had turned. For the first time, she wasn't leading the room, she was losing it. When Karen finally stormed out, leaving the board in disarray, neighbors turned to us. Some apologized. Some offered quiet words of support. Laura accepted them all with grace, never once lashing out, never once seeking revenge. That night, as we walked home, I asked her, "How can you be so calm after everything she's done?" She smiled faintly. "Because anger only gives her power. But dignity? That disarms her completely." Her words struck me. And though I still burned with frustration, I knew she was right. For a brief moment, things felt lighter. The neighbors were starting to see through Karen's lies. Daniels had laid bare the truth of Laura's past. Hope shimmered faintly across the lake again. But Laura was right, Karen wasn't finished. She couldn't let go of her control. And deep down I feared what her desperation might drive her to do next. And as it turned out, it's the real battle, the one that would decide everything, was just around the corner. The air was heavy with silence after the shocking moment when the officer froze at the sight of my wife. His lips had trembled as he addressed her commander, a word that carried weight, history, and authority. I could see Karen's smug grin collapse instantly, confusion spreading across her face like a bad storm. For a moment, no one said anything. My wife, Emily, stood with the calm dignity she had always carried. But now, there was something more. Something commanding. Her eyes locked on the officers, and in that instant, it felt like I was standing on the sidelines of a much larger story I hadn't fully known. "Officer Daniels," Emily finally said, her voice steady but tinged with both authority and sorrow. "I hoped I'd never have to see you like this." Karen's shrill voice cut in, unable to hold her tongue. "What is this? Why are you calling her commander? She's just some woman hiding in that cabin with her nobody husband. I called you to arrest them, not to salute them." The officer shot Karen a glare that could have frozen fire. "Quiet," he barked. His tone was so sharp, so commanding, that Karen actually took a step back, trembling. I looked at my wife, my heart racing. "Emily, what is going on? Why did he call you that?" She sighed deeply, as if the weight of years was pressing on her shoulders. "It's time you knew everything," she whispered. Emily slowly walked to the porch, her eyes never leaving the officers. "Daniels served under me overseas. Back when I was still in the service," I blinked, stunned. "Service? You mean military?" She nodded. "Not just military," Daniels interrupted. "Your wife was our commanding officer, a decorated intelligence commander. She saved more lives than anyone I've ever met. We owe her everything." I felt my knees weaken. "My wife's the woman who loved to bake pies on Sundays, who hummed two birds while watering the flowers, was suddenly revealed as someone I barely knew. My eyes stung with tears, not from betrayal, but from the enormity of realizing how much she had carried in silence. Karen, meanwhile, was flailing, her voice shrieking louder. "This is insane. You're all lying. She's just pretending this is some scam to keep me from getting what I want." Emily turned to her with a calm that cut sharper than anger. "You wanted my home? You broke in. You called the police thinking you could twist the law. But Karen, you don't understand. Some of us have already fought wars far greater than your petty greed." Daniel straightened his posture, his eyes locked on Karen now. "Ma'am, you are under arrest. Attempted breaking and entering, false police report, harassment, and if I dig deeper, I'm sure I'll find more." Karen's jaw dropped. She stumbled back. "Arrest? You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. This is my community, my rules." Emily's voice grew sharper, carrying the weight of every command she had ever given in her life. "No, Karen, this is not your kingdom. This is our home. And your reign of bullying ends today." The neighbors had begun gathering outside, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some were shocked, some relieved, and many were secretly glad to see Karen finally face consequences. One elderly couple even muttered, "It's about time." Daniels cuffed Karen as she kicked and screamed. "You'll regret this. All of you. You don't know who you're messing with?" But the truth was clear. She wasn't the powerful queen she thought she was. She was just a bitter woman whose control had finally slipped through her fingers. After Karen was dragged to the squad car, I turned to my wife. My heart was bursting with questions, but also with pride. "Emily, all this time, why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes softened. "Because I wanted a life beyond it all. After years of leading missions, making decisions that haunted me in my dreams, I just wanted peace. A cabin, a garden, a husband who loves me for me, not for my rank or my medals." I reached for her hands. "You didn't need to hide that from me. I love you, all of you. The commander and the gardener. The fighter and the woman who hums two birds." Tears welled in her eyes and she smiled, trembling. "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." Word spread quickly. Karen's arrest became the talk of the neighborhood. People who once followed her out of fear now avoided her name like poison. She was stripped of her HOA presidency, fined heavily, and faced a restraining order, preventing her from ever harassing us again. The irony was, as sharp she had tried to destroy us, but in the end, she destroyed herself. Neighbors came to us quietly, one by one, apologizing for not standing up sooner. One elderly man even said, "We should have defended you." She was a tyrant, but fear kept us silent. "Thank you for standing strong when we couldn't," Emily, in her quiet grace, simply replied, "Sometimes silence is its own battle. I don't hold it against you." Weeks passed. Peace returned to our home. The lake reflected the calm of a life we had fought to protect. One evening, as we sat on the porch together, I asked Emily, "Do you regret it? Not telling me sooner? Hiding your past?" She smiled softly. "No, because the past doesn't define who we are in the present. What matters is the life we choose to build today. And today, I choose this. Us. Peace. Love." I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling. "Then so do I." And for the first time in a long time, I realized something powerful. True strength isn't in control, or titles, or power. It's in the courage to protect what matters most, and in the humility to walk away from battles not worth fighting. As the sun set over the lake, I looked at Emily, this extraordinary woman who was both my wife and a hidden hero. My heart was full of gratitude, not just for her, but for the lesson we had both lived through, that even when life throws its cruelest storms, truth and love will always outshine lies and hate. And in the quiet peace of that evening, I knew our story wasn't just ours anymore. It was a reminder for anyone who had ever faced injustice, anyone who had ever been bullied, anyone who had ever kept a heavy secret, that strength takes many forms. Sometimes it roars, sometimes it commands, but sometimes it simply loves. And so, that's how the HOA president's greed unraveled her own downfall, how my wife's hidden past revealed the strength we never knew was right here at home. Have you ever faced someone like Karen? Someone who tried to control you only to be undone by their own actions? Share your story in the comments.